All right, let's talk about something that pretty much all of us have heard of, learning styles. You know, visual, auditory, kinesthetic. It just sounds so right, so intuitive. But what if I told you that one of the most popular ideas in all of education is actually a myth?
I mean, really think about it for a second. Have you ever said something like, "Oh, I'm a total visual learner. I have to see it to get it"? Of course you have. We all have. It feels like it's just a basic fact about who we are.
But here's the punchline. Decades of scientific research have come to a really clear and kind of startling conclusion. It doesn't actually matter. Your preference for how you like to get information has almost no impact on how well you actually learn it.
So let's break this down. This whole idea that we should match how we teach to someone's specific learning style is what researchers call the matching hypothesis. And you know what? For all its popularity, the evidence just isn't there. The matching hypothesis itself is super simple. If you say you're a visual learner, you'll learn best with pictures. If you're an auditory learner, you'll learn best from listening to someone talk. It seems to make perfect sense, which is exactly why the idea has been so sticky for so long. Okay, so if it feels so right, why is it so wrong? Well, because when scientists actually put the idea to the test, it completely falls apart. Let's look at what they discovered.
Look at that number, 0. That's not an exaggeration. When researchers reviewed all the studies, they found that trying to match a teaching style to a student's preferred learning style had a near zero effect on their grades and test scores. It just doesn't move the needle at all.
And this is where it gets kind of serious, because these labels can actually do more harm than good. When we put ourselves in a box, when we say, "Oh, I'm just not an auditory learner," we create a fixed mindset. It becomes this ready-made excuse for why we can't learn from a lecture or a podcast, and that just limits our own potential.
So here's the real key. It's the content that should decide the teaching method, not the learner's preference. This example is just perfect. You wouldn't try to teach a doctor to identify a skin rash just by describing it to them, would you? Of course not. They have to see it. You can't learn a foreign language's pronunciation just from a book. You have to hear it. The topic itself demands the right approach.
This is the big question then, right? If we're going to throw out this super popular idea of learning styles, what are we supposed to replace it with? Well, lucky for us, cognitive science has some very clear answers.
So let's get into the good stuff. Effective learning has almost nothing to do with our senses. Instead, it is all about active cognitive engagement. It's about what your brain is doing with the information, not just how that information gets in there. So, research points to a few fundamental truths. First, learning is an active thing. You have to build the knowledge yourself. You can't just passively absorb it. It's also often a social process. We learn from each other. And critically, our brains have to connect new information to things we already know. All of this, by the way, happens within the brain's natural limits for processing information. I absolutely love this line. Learning is not a spectator sport. It's so true. Deep, real, lasting learning only happens when we are doing something with the material. When we're talking about it, writing about it, maybe even arguing about it, and trying to apply it to messy, real-world situations. So how do we make this happen? Let's get practical and look at the toolkit. The big idea is to shift learners from being passive and, let's say, asleep, to being active and awake and really engaged.
These are what you might call the alarm clock strategies. First, get people active. Have them solve problems, work in groups, create something. Second, always connect the new stuff to what they already know. Third, and this is a big one, teach metacognition, which is really just a fancy way of saying thinking about your own thinking. Get them to ask, "Do I really get this?" And finally, give really good feedback that's specific and shows them how to get better.
And we can get even more specific. There are these incredibly powerful, research-backed frameworks that anyone can use. Things like I do, we do, you do. First the teacher shows you, then you do it together, then you do it on your own. Or backward design, where you figure out the end goal before you plan a single activity. These things work because they're built for how the brain is actually wired.
So, look, if you only remember one thing from all of this, let it be this. Real learning isn't about finding your style. It's about designing experiences that force your brain to actively wrestle with new ideas.
So, there you have it. The myth is busted. Now you know the truth about learning styles. And the real question is, what are you going to do with that information? Whether you're a teacher, a student, or you just like learning new things, how will this change the way you approach learning starting right now?